Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I've been in a relationship with a German guy for just about 4 years now, in which half of that time we've spent living apart from each other. Like, really far apart. Like, on different continents. Despite the hardship of not just living apart from each other, but also the added stress of immigration and visas and not having really any semblance of predictability for when we will be able to settle where. Oh, and a freaking pandemic in which our countries banned each other from visiting, we're making it work. Now, I know that a lot of you are in long distance relationships, or maybe you're considering being in one, and I'm all too aware of how 2020 has exacerbated a lot of challenges that come with LDRs. So I'm going to share with you exactly how Misha and I have been able to keep this flaming ball of love burning, how we're keeping this love boat afloat, how we're still, oh my god, get to the point. Right then. The first thing I tell anyone who is considering a long distance relationship is you have to lay the foundation. And what I mean by that is, first, both people need to be committed to doing a long distance relationship. I know this might sound obvious, but I also know what it's like to live as a romantic optimist. I blame watching just a few too many Disney princess movies as a child. So I mean it when I say that you need to be realistic about it. If your partner or potential partner is not keen on the idea of doing a long distance relationship, it's probably not going to work. You can try to force it or persuade them all you want, but you shouldn't have to convince someone to be in a relationship with you. By the way, that goes for any relationship, not just a long distance one. Second, you have to be able to trust each other. Now, I realize that for most people, trust is built over time. So I wouldn't expect you to have ironclad trust for one another right out the gate. But if you already have doubts about the other person's integrity, those doubts will work like cracks and weaken your relationship's foundation and potentially lead to a breakup, as it is infinitely more difficult to work on trust issues when you're apart from each other. All right, so now that you've got the foundation, let's talk about guiding principles. These are all things that Misha and I actively do to keep our relationship on course. These aren't in any particular order, but I want to start with something that I really had to learn to do. You need to both manage and communicate your expectations, as well as manage and receive your partner's expectations. So if you need something from your partner because it's important to you, then communicate that need clearly to your partner. Don't let them fail to meet an expectation simply because you haven't even communicated it. Maybe they don't realize how much it means to you if it's not something they themselves need from a partner. Similarly, make sure you're keyed in on what sort of expectations your partner has for you. Further, make sure that you're managing the expectations you have for your partner. Understand that they have limitations and constraints that might prevent them from being everything you want them to be at all times. Just as you might not be able to fulfill every expectation your partner has for you. For a personal example, I low-key am convinced I'm going to one day die in a plane crash. Maybe that sounds weird to those of you who are normal. Now, I don't let this fear stop me from traveling, so I still go on flights. But it really means a lot for me to be able to text one last I love you to Misha as my plane is about to take off, and for him to text me back that he loves me. Misha knows this is important to me, not because he has the same completely illogical fear, but because I've communicated that expectation to him. And so he makes sure to be paying attention to his phone when I'm boarding a flight. And if he has some obligation or otherwise cannot be available to text me, he tells me in advance so that my expectations are managed. Next, and honestly, I can't overstate this, you need to have your own life apart from your partner. I think this is true for all relationships, but it's absolutely critical for long distance relationships. Because by the very nature of an LDR, you cannot be dependent on your partner in a lot of ways. And further, it can be unhealthy to put yourself into situations where you're constantly reminded of their absence. So make your own friends, pick up your own hobbies, go to new places. Not only will this help you feel fulfilled, but keeping actively engaged in something that doesn't involve your partner will ensure that you have something interesting to share when you talk with your partner. Now, something to be aware of is that typically, not always, but typically, one of you will be in a more disadvantageous position or perhaps be struggling more than the other. And maybe this switches back and forth depending on the circumstances. And maybe it's not obvious, but make sure you are mindful of this dynamic. For example, when Misha moved back to Germany after living with me here in DC for a little bit, he found himself in the more disadvantageous position. I was very settled in DC. My apartment had all of our furniture and it felt like home, whereas Misha was in a very transient status. He started a new job in a new city, he was living in an Airbnb. Don't get me wrong, he was doing well by all accounts, but the scales were definitely tipped in my favor. Now at the time, I hadn't given it much thought, and really I was just quite jealous that he got to go back to Germany while my career kept me in DC, but it was important for me to recognize the stress he was dealing with. Stress that was completely absent from my life. And further, to recognize the sacrifices he was making, primarily in maintaining stability, so that my career could be accommodated. Okay, the next guiding principle is to respect each other's time. Of course, your partner is one of your priorities, and of course, you want to dedicate time to them. But the reality is that you most likely are not able to consistently make your partner your top priority and dedicate 24 hours, 7 days a week to them. You will have other obligations you need to tend to and other priorities that require your attention, and so will your partner. Work to understand each other's priorities and give each other the grace needed to meet those priorities. And the last guiding principle before I move on to LDR tips is communicate your feelings. I'm sure you've noticed that good communication is the underlying requirement for everything I've talked about so far, but I really want to drive this particular point home. We are all emotional beings, and life can be challenging in both expected and unexpected ways. Communicate how you're feeling to your partner so that you aren't leaving them in the dark. Maybe it's helpful for you to talk through your issues with them, or maybe you just need some space to work through it on your own. Whatever it is, tell your partner, because your partner is your teammate and will support you however you need. All right, on to long distance relationship tips. The biggest and best tip I can give is schedule your phone calls. You need to decide how frequently you want to talk. Maybe it's every day, maybe it's every few days, or maybe because of the time zone difference, it can only be on the weekends. Whatever it is, figure it out together. Then you need to agree on a time of day that works for both of you. Not only do you need to work around your schedules, but ideally you want to find a time where both of you are at your best or near best. Are you a morning person? Are you too tired after work to participate in meaningful conversation? These are things to consider when scheduling your phone calls. Another extra tip is make sure that you schedule the call for a limited amount of time, like 30 minutes or an hour, so that you keep the conversation engaging and interesting without just drawing it out. This will also allow you to reliably schedule other things after the call or get to bed on time without having to unexpectedly cut your partner off. Now, of course, outside of phone calls, you will most likely text with your partner, which is great, obviously. But remember that texts leave out a lot of context that comes with hearing a person's tone of voice. So if you feel that a text won't fully communicate what you want to say, or if you receive a text from your partner that is very off-putting, just pick up the phone and call, or hold off on that subject or conversation until your next scheduled phone call. Another one of my favorite tips is to share something you're grateful for to your partner every day. I'm someone who thinks that there is a lot of benefit to keeping gratitude journals, and sharing gratitude with your partner can be valuable and establish a positive tone in your daily communication, even on tougher days. Next tip is to do things together virtually. I think it's safe to say that 2020 has really ushered in an era of engaging with people virtually. So there are tons of ideas out there for creative ways you can connect. Something Misha and I started to do was read a book together. It was like we were in our own little exclusive book club, where we would choose a book and then we would talk about the chapters as we read them and share our thoughts. You can also schedule a FaceTime movie date where you hit play on a movie or a TV show at the same time while on video chat so that you can share your reactions in the moment. Maybe play an online game together, or if you're committed enough to each own a set of the same board game, you can even manage to play your favorite board game together. I love board games. You can also each order the same meal to eat together while video chatting, or maybe order delivery for your partner to treat them from afar. Perhaps along the same lines as the book club, pick something to learn together. Maybe it's a new language or an instrument, but trying out a new hobby together can really help to keep things interesting while also engaging in some self-development. Another thing you can do is take a walk together, where you're just on a normal audio call, not on speakerphone while walking, but take some photos of your scenery during the call that you can share during or after the call. And speaking of photos, maybe you do something like a photo challenge or a photo scavenger hunt together. See who can take the better photo of a given subject or theme. That's something I really love to do. Another thing Misha and I started doing was writing a short story once a week. We get on Reddit, we choose a writing prompt from the subreddit Writing Prompts. I know, so creative. We take 30 minutes to each write our short story, and then we read them to each other and post them onto Reddit. It's been a lot of fun to see how each of us interpret a writing prompt differently and what we can come up with to write about. And of course, plan out when you will be able to see each other next so that you have something to look forward to. Now, this was admittedly a little crushing for Misha and I this past year, since our travel plans kept getting canceled due to each other's countries' travel bans. But keeping in mind that long distance is just a temporary state of your relationship is super helpful. And maybe establish a tradition for what you do when you see each other. Maybe it's a certain dinner you always have on your first night back together, or a certain activity you do. Look, I'm not trying to get demonetized here, and I think you can read between the lines. Alright guys, that's all for today's video. For those of you who are in long distance relationships, I am thinking of you. You can do this. Stay strong. I am a pretty clingy girlfriend, so I'm in the mindset that if I can be in a long distance relationship, anyone should be able to be in a long distance relationship. So best of luck, and if you have any questions for me, put them in the comments below and I will try to answer them as I can. If you liked this video, guys, please help me out by giving it a big thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you're not following me on Instagram, look me up at Kelly Does Her Thing. I'm always posting different stories on there for you guys to check out. Thank you so much to all my patrons for the support you've given me, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!